The portion known as Vayelekh gets its name from the opening pasuk, which in Hebrew reads, Vayelekh Moshe vayidaber et hadvarim ha'eleh et kol Yisrael. In English it reads, Moshe went and spoke the following words to all Yisrael. The story itself picks up as a continuation of the previous portion. To be sure, in regular years, Vayelekh is actually read with the previous parsha called Nitzavim. Moshe, the designated leader of Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, he's actually nearing his final days on this earth. At 120 years old, he's actually ready to pass the responsibility of leading the people on to Yehoshua, Joshua, his faithful servant. And so he reminds the people that because of Hashem's punishment, he himself will not accompany them, but that Yehoshua will lead them into the promised land. Remember, Moshe was told to speak to the rock, and instead he struck it twice. His encouragement to be strong and reliant on the protection of the Almighty despite the seeming opposition ahead, the giants in the land, it's typical of this most famous leader of Israel. I want to talk a little bit about this passing of the torch from between these two leaders. So my next paragraph in my commentary is entitled From Moshe to Yehoshua. Of the 120 years that Moshe lived, a better part of his last third of his life, the last 40 years, was spent in encouraging this young nation to press on to the greatness that Hashem had called them into. I personally think that at this point in his life, and of course in the lives of the people, that this compassionate servant of the Lord knew that, they needed to hear this type of message. They were tender, and they needed this type of encouragement and this type of, how shall we say, kind of a fatherly talk, but done in such a way as to kind of cheer them on, to affirm to them that they can make it, they can do it, if they just stay the course. And Moshe was the only one suitable for delivering it to them. Otherwise, we might imagine that Moshe may have simply conveyed these words to Yehoshua and said, after I'm dead, go ahead and read all these words to the people. But Moshe didn't do that. He gave them the delivery himself. The fact that in verses 7 and 8, he publicly admonishes Yehoshua to leadership, publicly, he does this in front of the people, it was also a very wise administrative action. It's a good move on his part. Not to mention, I believe it was necessary. The people needed to see that Moshe was conferring and transferring his trust and his leadership. The mantle was being passed on to Yehoshua. When the people witnessed this passing of the mantle of responsibility between these two great leaders, we've got one who's already proven in faithful service, while the other possessing great potential. The people could see this. What it is, I believe that it only reaffirmed to Israel the confidence that Moshe had in Yehoshua. That's what the people needed to see. They needed to understand that Moshe trusted Joshua, and that Moshe was confident that after he passed on, that Joshua would indeed lead the people properly. It served as a visible statement to let people know that since you trusted me, this is like Moshe speaking, right? Since you trusted me, and since I can trust Yehoshua, then you can trust him also. Hashem himself then summons the two of these great leaders into the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, for the official transfer leadership, as it were. Now, I'm ex-military. I used to be in the Army from 96 to 2000. I spent some time in Korea. That's where I met Suki. And being in the military, I had the opportunity to witness firsthand this type of change of command procedure that I believe is taking place here in our passage. What we would have is we would have an elaborate ceremony between the troops. We'd have the outgoing commander giving the troops his final challenge or his final charge. He would bring the troops to attention, bring them into formation, give us some orders, maybe some I can't remember, some facing moves where we, right, left face, right face, stop, about face, things like that. And then he, the outgoing commander, would encourage us, the troops, to show his successor, the incoming commander, the same loyalty and trust that we have shown to him. And it's a very moving time to see these two commanders come together, one the outgoing, one the incoming. In a way, I believe that Hashem picks up on this theme of challenge and he runs with it. In fact, as we read further into the passage, we see that he runs quite far with it. So let's read one verse and then we can comment on it. Chapter 31, verse 19, the latter half of that verse reads, quote, "This song can be a witness for me against the people of Israel," end quote. Notice the theme of witness, right? Having warned the people about their coming days of lawlessness. Remember, we talked about how Moshe looked into the future of the people and he gave them a choice. He gave them on the right hand life and on the left hand death. He said, choose this day, life or death. Choose life. I present before you two choices. You choose. Moshe, speaking through the Spirit of God, was able to see into the future of the people and see that they were going to make some very unwise choices. He warned the people about the coming days of lawlessness in this passage as well, in chapter 31, verses 16 through 18. Hashem then commands Moshe to do something special for the people. He asks Moshe to teach the people a song of remembrance, which we find in this passage in verses 19 through 22. And keeping up with this theme of witness, this song itself is going to serve as a witness for their God against the people of Israel. Now, the actual song is recorded for us in chapter 32, which we'll have to wait till next week's parashah to examine it. But why does Hashem keep reminding them, you might ask yourself, of their upcoming failure to obey Him? You ever notice that? Why does God tell them that they're going to disobey Him and that they're going to fail Him? I mean, from a cursory glance, if you just read it at face value, it appears rather, what I would say, is pessimistic and disheartening. I mean, why couldn't we have more optimism sometimes? Now, again, I'm not uncomfortable with the passage. We're dialoguing with the text, okay? We're midrashing. We're asking the text questions so that we can understand further what God is trying to teach the people. That's all we're doing, all right? In fact, it might strike the average reader as being too harsh and too challenging sometimes as we read these passages. But I believe we need to understand the heart of the Father here. His loving chastening, it actually does appear at first to be too much for us to bear. At first, we cry out, God, it's more than I can handle. But as we begin to see what I call the big picture in the thing, we begin to understand it more. And so that's what we have to do. We have to be able to read through and see the larger lesson that's being taught to the people and as to why God says the things that He says.